Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely wild. We're talking about the most absurdly massive engineering feat of the entire Cold War, the Tsar Bomba, or the King of Bombs. This was a creation of such staggering, honestly unimaginable scale that it defied all military logic and ultimately completely altered the course of nuclear history. We've got some fascinating ground to cover, so let's just get right into it.
So, right off the bat, here's the core paradox we're exploring today. How did humanity's most powerful weapon become completely useless for actual war? It's a crazy question, right? I mean, the engineers and scientists behind this project successfully built the ultimate explosive device, but in doing so, they created something so extreme, so unbelievably huge, that it literally defeated its own purpose as a deployable weapon.
To understand just how extreme this project really was, try to put yourself in the pilot's shoes for a second. Imagine you're part of a crew of 9 men, flying a massive Soviet bomber painted head to toe in this special anti-flash white paint. Why the paint? Well, to give your plane just a tiny, slight chance of surviving the blistering heat of the very bomb you're dropping. And even with that precaution, the crew was given a really chilling warning before takeoff. Their chances of making it back from this mission alive? 50-50.
Okay, let's move to Section 1, the unusable weapon.
Let's break down the sheer, terrifying scale of what these pilots were actually carrying. The payload in that bomber was a weapon with a yield of 50 megatons. Now, 1 megaton represents the explosive energy of 1 million tons of TNT. So we're talking about the equivalent of 50 million tons of TNT detonating all at once. To put that physical weight into perspective, if you gathered up all the elephants currently alive on Earth, you wouldn't even come close to that weight. You'd need something like 10 million elephants just to match the mass of the explosives we're talking about here.
To truly wrap our heads around that kind of destruction, let's compare it. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima back in 1945 had a yield of about 15 kilotons. The Tsar Bomba, it was over 3,000 times more powerful than that. And here's a fact that's just mind-boggling. If you take every single explosive used in the entire Second World War by all nations combined, the Tsar Bomba alone was roughly 10 times more powerful than the whole shebang. It's a scale of destruction that our brains honestly struggle to even picture.
Which brings us to Section 2, Cold War Power Play.
You're probably wondering, why on earth would anyone build something this massive if it couldn't actually be used in a real combat scenario? Well, the answer lies in the intense political theater of the Cold War. Back in 1959, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev got into a really heated debate with U.S. Vice President Richard Nixon. During this back and forth, Khrushchev made a famous, boastful threat. Translated, it basically was, "We will show you Kuzma's mother." It's this old Russian idiom that essentially means, "We're going to teach you a severe lesson." Tensions were already through the roof, especially with the Berlin Wall going up in 1960. Khrushchev felt this urgent, absolute need for a terrifying, undeniable show of Soviet strength.
And that intense political pressure turned into a wildly strict deadline. Khrushchev calls up this top nuclear scientist, Andrei Sakharov, and orders the creation of this superweapon in just 16 weeks. Why 16 weeks? Because he wanted it ready for the 22nd Communist Party Congress in October 1961. It was, for all intents and purposes, a massive vanity project, a deterrent statement just meant to shock the world. Interestingly enough, this fits perfectly into a long historical Russian tradition of building these giant, unusable objects just for display. Think of the massive Tsar bell that never rang, or the colossal Tsar cannon that literally never fired a shot in war. The Tsar Bomba was destined to be a purely symbolic display of power, detonated right in their own skies.
Let's dive into Section 3, Engineering the Monster.
Pulling off this 16-week miracle required some daunting, almost impossible science. This work happened in a highly classified secret city known as Arzama 16, a place that was entirely wiped off all official maps. Here, Sakharov's team had to harness the power of fusion. Now, nuclear fission, like the Hiroshima bomb, involves splitting heavy atoms apart to release massive energy and heat. But fusion, which is the basis of a hydrogen bomb, is the process of joining small hydrogen atoms together. It's literally the exact same physical process that powers our sun, and it yields exponentially more power than fission.
But here's the catch. You can't just smash hydrogen atoms together on a whim. They require unimaginable heat and pressure to actually fuse. So the internal mechanism of a hydrogen bomb is essentially a bomb within a bomb. Step 1, you have to detonate a standard fission bomb first. Step 2, that initial explosion creates the immense sun-like heat and pressure you need. And Step 3, that extreme environment acts as a giant match to finally ignite the massive hydrogen fusion sequence.
To make this all work safely, though, the team had to execute an incredible scientific pivot.
The original design actually called for a staggering 100 megaton yield, using a thick layer of uranium as a tamper. But Sakharov's team ran the numbers and quickly realized, actually, wait, a 100 megaton blast with a uranium tamper is going to create so much radioactive fallout it would poison a massive portion of the Earth. So they swapped the uranium out for lead. This single decision halved the bomb's power down to 50 megatons, but it dramatically reduced the radiation. It made the Tsar Bomba an incredible 97% clean bomb, meaning it significantly cut down the lethal radioactive poison released into our atmosphere. But even dialed back to 50 megatons, just delivering the thing was an absolute engineering nightmare. The bomb weighed 27 tons and was over 8 meters long. It literally did not fit inside the largest Soviet bomber they had, the Tu-95. Look at these crazy mechanical compromises they had to make. They completely ripped the bomb bay doors right off the plane. They had to shrink the plane's fuel tanks just to physically cram the weapon in there. And to give those pilots that 50-50 chance to escape the blast, they attached an 800-kilogram parachute to the bomb. A parachute so massive it measured 1,600 square meters just to slow its fall. But by shrinking those fuel tanks, they basically guaranteed the plane could never reach a real enemy target like the US and actually return. It proved, once again, this was a display piece, not a real tactical weapon.
All right, moving on to Section 4, the terrifying test flight. On October 30th, 1961, the moment of truth arrived. The target was the frozen, totally desolate Arctic islands of Novaya Zemlya. The drop sequence itself was an agonizing 188 seconds. The Tu-95, piloted by Andrei Sakharov, released the bomb at an altitude of 10,000 meters. For 3 incredibly long minutes, that massive parachute slowed the bomb's fall, giving the pilot just enough time to push the throttles to the absolute maximum and run for his life. At 4,000 meters above the ground, the bomb detonated. By the time the immense shock wave finally caught up to the escaping plane, they were already 115 kilometers away. Yet the force was still so unbelievably fierce that it instantly dropped the massive bomber 800 meters out of the sky before the pilot could finally regain control.
The absolute devastation of that single moment is genuinely hard to comprehend. The fireball alone was 8 kilometers wide. The resulting mushroom cloud shot up 64 kilometers into the sky, effortlessly piercing the stratosphere. The flash of the explosion, visible a staggering 1,000 kilometers away. Even at 270 kilometers away, looking through thick clouds, observers literally felt the intense heat on their faces. The village of Severny, which was 55 kilometers from ground zero, was entirely erased from existence. Experts estimated that anyone within 100 kilometers would have suffered third-degree burns. And the shockwave was so incredibly powerful that global sensors detected it circling the Earth not once, not twice, but 3 full times. 3 times.
Let's look at Section 5, an unintended legacy.
You know, this singular event didn't just alter global politics, it profoundly altered one man's soul. The sheer terror of this test sent shockwaves, both literal and political, all around the world. Seeing the devastating environmental potential of atmospheric radiation from tests like this, it forced global leaders to finally hit the brakes. Just 2 years later, in 1963, the United States, the Soviet Union, and Great Britain signed the Partial Test Ban Treaty, officially banning nuclear weapons tests in the atmosphere, underwater, and in outer space. The biggest bomb ever built actually helped close the skies to nuclear testing. But on a personal level, the horror of that blast catalyzed a really profound internal shift for the man who actually built it. Andrei Sakharov had watched the test. He later hauntingly described that white anti-flash delivery bomber as a bird of death. That visual just stayed with him forever. He began to deeply, truly realize that what he had engineered wasn't just a military tool, but an existential threat to humanity itself. And that leads us to the ultimate, almost unbelievable irony of this whole story. The Soviet Oppenheimer, the brilliant mind who successfully built history's most destructive weapon, well, he couldn't live with the reality of his own creation. He became a fierce, outspoken advocate for nuclear disarmament and human rights, openly challenging the Soviet government. He was persecuted, he was exiled for his activism, but the rest of the world recognized his complete transformation. In 1975, the architect of the King of Bombs was actually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. By pushing the boundaries of destruction to their absolute logical limit, by creating a weapon too terrible, too massive, and too impractical to ever actually be used in a real war, did humanity accidentally take its first real step towards surviving the nuclear age? It really seems like the absolute peak of Cold War vanity actually became the very catalyst for global nuclear restraint. It's just a powerful reminder of how history's darkest creations can sometimes force us toward the light. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.